Hey everyone. So I have been playing a lot of racing games, and in fact, I've been playing racing games for most of my life. And it started with the Need for Speed series, but I've been playing uh, all any racing game I can basically get my hands on, um, including stuff like Gran Turismo and Forza, or the arcade racers like Need for Speed. And despite graphics getting better, physics getting better, um, and video games generally improving over time, I find myself coming back to racing games from this particular era, and specifically uh, Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005. And the version I'm playing right here is the Redux version on PC, which also includes some modern graphics and controller mods. Um, But this one's a little bit special, and so I want to talk a little bit about what makes this game and this particular era of racing games special. And I'm also going to compare it a little bit to some modern racing games. And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with modern racing games, um, but I think this game, Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005, does something a little special. So we'll start with graphics, and particularly uh, specifically the art style. I think this is something that was unique to the early and mid 2000s, and this was coming right off of Need for Speed Underground 2, which took place all at night and leaned very heavily into the Fast and Furious street racing aesthetic. This one sort of evolved that, and it takes place entirely at day, or what seems like to be dusk and sunset mostly. And it sort of has this mid 2000s grungy yellow and brown filter aesthetic, which eventually did get a little tired as a whole ton of games around this time released with this particular aesthetic. Um, but at the time, it was really unique. And you can see with the art style and the menus, it's got this sort of graffiti style typography. It's got this sort of like really interesting high contrast visuals. Um, And not a ton of games and racing games in particular have leaned into this style. Even the 2012 uh, modern reboot of Most Wanted attempted to lean into this aesthetic, but it didn't quite capture the feeling of the era. So visuals are pretty cool here, and I think that's one reason I go back to this one in particular. Something that's also, I think, really well done in the 2005 version of this game is progression. And it's something that modern games really struggle with, where modern games tend to just throw everything at you and constantly reward you, but things never really feel earned. So in this version, you look at the map, you open it up, there are map markers everywhere, just like modern games. But the map itself, the races, um, and the vehicles available to you actually slowly get unlocked based on your progression. And here you can see you have to work through the blacklist. So in Most Wanted, basically you start at blacklist level 15 and you have to work your way all the way up to 1. And you have to complete a series of racing events and milestones at each level in order to challenge that particular rival. It's basically like a boss fight for each round. And what I love about this style is you have to start from the bottom with a really junky car, with no visual upgrades, with no performance upgrades, and essentially have to work your way up through the blacklist, earning money and choosing how you want to spend that money, and how you want to invest in your car. So you have to make interesting choices like, do you buy new performance parts so you can win races more easily? Do you buy visual upgrades so you look cooler? which at the time was very important, especially coming off of the Fast and Furious series' popularity at the time. Or do you try and save up and try and win as many races as you can without upgrading? That way you can purchase a whole new car. And you couldn't sell your car until you bought a new one, which also added to the challenge. And this progression system, I think, is one of the reasons I keep coming back. This was during the era of, or this was right before the live service era. This is right before games were designed to keep you playing infinitely. This was a game that had a definite start and definite end. And you essentially played through it like a single player campaign. It was almost like an open world RPG in the sense where you start with a little bit of power, and over time your power progresses and your abilities progress, and your car gets better, and your car looks cooler, and you get new cars, and eventually you work your way all the way up to the top. So progression here was really special, and it really made you feel like you earned your place in each race. You couldn't just start anywhere you wanted. I would think that was part of what made it so special, is you actually had to work through it like an RPG. Before we go on to talk about some more modern games, I also want to talk about the feel of racing. Need for Speed Most Wanted was very much an arcade racer. This was not a sim racer. This did not have realistic physics. But the racing feel was still a little bit special, where the cars actually felt like they had weight. They weren't like some newer games, and especially newer games in the series, like once Criterion took over, where modern games kind of had this almost floaty feel. They leaned very heavily on drifting. Cars almost felt like they were rotating on the center on a center axis. Where in Most Wanted, it almost felt like you could feel the car turning based on where the tires were pointing. So the cars themselves felt weighty, and it actually felt like you were gripping onto the track. And I feel like that's something that got a little lost over time. And I think the closest now, today, to this kind of feeling would definitely be the Forza Horizon series. But and the Forza Horizon series, I would say now has done this much better because it uses actual physics models based on the Forza Motorsport series. But at the time, this was really special, and I was very sad when they started to drift away from this particular um, feeling of racing. So now let's compare that to the 2012 version of the same game, which is really mostly the same, I would say, only in name. It was a totally different developer. This was Criterion, who had developed the Burnout series. And it's pretty clear they brought a lot of that DNA from the Burnout series over to 2012. I'll say this game looks amazing. It is a very fun game to play. I wouldn't say it's a bad racing game, but I don't think it successfully transferred over what was special about the original game, in the sense that it brought over the aesthetic, it brought over the name, it brought over some of the base level mechanics uh, like police chases, for example. But it didn't really bring over the vibe, and it didn't really bring over the progression. And one thing in particular that I really dislike about this game is the cars are essentially meaningless, in the sense that you're literally gifted cars. You gain new cars by literally just finding them. You can just pull up to a car and find them out in the open world and then drive them. And the first car you find is this Porsche 911 here. I think it's a 911. Anyway, the first car you get is a Porsche. Uh, and that just sets the bar. There's no progression. I don't even think there's any upgrades. Even the visuals themselves You don't have to earn, like in this example right here, just drive right through this station and it just automatically fixes the car and gives it a new coat of paint that I did not choose. So it kind of makes you feel a little disconnected from the cars themselves. It is a fun playground to drive through. It's all kinds of crazy destruction happening while you're driving, but it doesn't really quite capture that feeling of like a car RPG. And instead, what you get is just this ridiculous playground. Also, talk a little about the feel of driving. And while again, I'll say this game is fun to drive, fun in an arcadey sort of way. It definitely lost a little bit of that grounded feel that the older series had. In this case, you can see cars are kind of just flying around, bumping into things. When you crash into things, it has this really cool crash cam, but the crash itself almost makes the car feel a little floaty and paper thin. And you can see the racing itself is leaning very heavily on this drifting mechanic, which I'm personally not a huge fan of. Yeah, here's a crash here, and it just kind of makes everything feel a little like unrealistic. Not obviously it's an arcade racer, but unrealistic in the sense that there's like it didn't really feel like there are any consequences here. It didn't really feel weighty. It just felt like a cool cinematic scene, and then you just get right back into the race. So I had fun with this game when it came out, but I don't go back to it. And this isn't really the type of game I like to play. And finally, let's talk about Forza Horizon 5 and Forza Horizon 4 and 3 and 2. And I don't know that I ever played the first one, but they're all kind of similar. And again, these are amazing games. The graphics are amazing. I love seeing which new location each release will take us to. The physics of driving are incredible. But what I find myself doing with these games is I'm always excited about them when they come out. I always jump into it. I'm always super immersed for a few hours. And then I just kind of drop off somewhere around the 10 to 15 hour mark. And I occasionally I'll go back, fire up a race or two, but I never really get into it. And I never really feel like I'm working towards any particular goal. And again, I think that has a lot to do with progression. In the Forza Horizon series, you basically get access to everything right from the beginning. So you get access to the entire map. Not all of the map markers are revealed to you, and more do get revealed to you as you race. But they are thrown at you constantly. You are constantly unlocking new cars. There's even a spin the wheel mechanic where you just win new cars randomly. And the game feels almost afraid to let you feel any consequences or stakes. If you crash, you can rewind. The game is constantly telling you you're doing a great job. And it's so positive that it kind of means nothing. And so while I love so many things about these games, it's not something I find myself coming back to as much as I would like to. So, anyway, I'll go ahead and start to wrap up here with some final thoughts. And as a longtime racing game fan, I would love to see a modern take on the open world racer that leans more into the car RPG style that we had in the early 2000s. Basically, I want the graphics and physics and sort of immersion of a game like Forza Horizon, but I want the progression system of the 2005 Need for Speed Most Wanted. So, anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you checking out my videos if you made it to the end. I just passed 100 subscribers for the first time, so that's pretty cool. And I appreciate you checking this out. If you like to just listen to me ramble, cool. If you're interested in this stuff, cool. I have other videos on my channel, and I occasionally upload more. And thanks for stopping by.